Divorce and an oath. Listen, a friend of mine, good friend of mine, is going through a sad divorce. And his wife, she never much liked accountability, and as a result, she seems to want both men, which is crazy. It seems that way, or at least she doesn't want him any longer. And today I'm going to show you biblically that when infidelity occurs in a marriage, the marriage covenant or the oath is officially broken and cannot be repaired. Today I'm going to show you through the words of Jesus in Matthew 5:27 through verses 37 exactly why this is. Welcome to Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first and the reasons come last, but we're always and constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. I was going to read Matthew 5:27 to 37, but I'm going to let you read that on your own. I want to point out a few things in this passage, because it's what's amazing in this passage. I'll just kind of paraphrase what's going on here. Jesus specifically addresses the issue of divorce. This is not the only place in the Bible that addresses a divorce, but this is one of the most poignant passages that addresses divorce. And everybody has the same thing. Okay, it says this, it says that, divorce, infidelity. Let's look a little bit deeper, because I know infidelity is the reason, but what's beneath infidelity? You know what that is? It's the oath. And that's why really within this passage, there are really two different passages. And what I find fascinating is the fact that Jesus addresses the law of infidelity, and then he goes right into the seriousness of breaking the oath. But he doesn't say the oath in their marriage covenant, but a covenant and a marriage covenant is an oath. And that's important. The way Jesus teaches, he's a master teacher. He is the master teacher. And what I love about what he does is he gives you something to get your hands around. Let's talk about divorce. Why is that? More than 50%, and that includes the church today, end in divorce. That shouldn't be, and that's just wrong. And I don't believe there's 50% good reason to get a divorce. So that's what I want to jump right into. But we'll look here first at verse 32, which makes clear that divorce is not allowed for Christians except for on the grounds of sexual immorality. Matthew 19, chapter 19, verses 3 to 9, Mark 10, 2 to 12, and Luke 16, 18 speaks about Jesus' teaching on divorce. You could see all those passages, okay, or all those verses. It's disallowed, divorce that is. It's disallowed except for unchastity, which, what does that mean? Well, it means, first of all, could be number one, adultery, meaning cheating on your on your husband or your spouse, or your husband or your wife that you've taken in marriage through a covenant before God and others and to one another. Number two could just mean unfaithfulness during the period of betrothal. The most luminous example of betrothal in the Bible is chapter 1, verse 19. Remember, Joseph noticed that Mary was pregnant, right? Well, he wasn't involved with that. That was a supernatural miracle of the Holy Spirit. Well, what he was going to do, but he was going to divorce her. Well, hold a second. They hadn't had the marriage yet. They hadn't had the wedding yet. So in the ancient days, there was a period of time of engagement, or they call it betrothal. That is this, in the times of Jesus. It was customarily considered as if you were being married already, really. The families knew it. Everything was together. And it was just before the official, the actual ceremony, okay? So it was almost like they were married. Really, by the time they got to the marriage ceremony, they technically were married already, certainly before God, and so they need an official divorce to break that off. This is based on Genesis 29:21, if you want to look at it, as well Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 to 30. That's number two, betrothal. And third and lastly, divorces would be allowed if the marriage was found to be between near relatives. Leviticus 18 and Acts 15:29 speak to that. So what it's intrigued me about this passage is that Jesus addressed the law of adultery in Matthew 5:27 to 30, and then summarizes the law of divorce in verses 31 and 32. But then Jesus does something unexpected, and then he goes right into the law of oaths, verses 33 to 37. Listen, folks, as I said earlier, I don't believe this is any mistake. And because I believe this is by no accident that the marriage covenant is so closely, or as clearly as an oath, fell just after his law on adultery. You know, as such, Jesus wants us to know the why behind God's law of making divorce a no-no unless the covenant oath has been broken. Then Jesus explains to us the importance of an oath in relation to the marriage covenant as well as to all oaths. even outside of the marriage covenant, and why breaking such an oath is such a serious offense in God's eyes. See, Jesus warns us strictly not to swear falsely in taking an oath in the marriage covenant. The law is broken, and the offense is taken against God himself when one perjures him or herself. Remember, we've seen people in politics, they get arrested for perjury. If you lie to a police officer or you lie in court, you then will get charges against you of perjury. And where do you take the oath? Where do you go to court, right? I don't care if it's traffic court, criminal court, divorce court. I swear on what? Bible. President of the United States sworn in on what? Bible. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Now, oaths taken in the name of the Lord were binding in biblical times, and perjury, meaning to break that oath, was strongly condemned in the law. You can see Exodus 20, verse 7, and Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2, and Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 16 to 19. Every oath in biblical times contained an affirmation or promise and an appeal to God as the omniscient punisher of falsehoods. A lot of people can't handle that today, which made the oath binding. People would want to keep it binding. They wouldn't want to face the wrath of God. I would assert that the same is true for you and I today in the 21st century. And why do I say that? Because God is immutable, meaning that he's unchanging. He can't change. It's against his nature. And an oath is based on fidelity and truth, is it not? And to believe that the grace of Jesus makes breaking an oath okay because he just has grace on us, I think it's failing to adhere to the truth of God and is simply as something that's okay. That's simply wrong. It's unbiblical, and it's a great offense to the persons between you broke the oath and to God himself more so. Remember, Joseph fled from Potiphar's wife trying to trap him in adultery. In her lust, she said to Joseph after she had grabbed his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And that's the second time, or at least the second time she said it. In verse 7, picking up in verses 8 to 9, the Bible says, "But he refused and said to his master's wife, 'Behold, because of my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is no greater in the house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except for you,'" his wife, right? "Because you are his wife. Now then, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" He said it straight away there, man. Three major things are going on here. Number one, Potiphar's wife is trying to lustfully trap Joseph and cause him to commit adultery. This is all too common in today's world. Number two, Joseph is trying to explain that the importance of his assumed oath to Potiphar includes his fidelity to Potiphar, to his office, and certainly to respond in his response to Potiphar's wife. Joseph makes clear that he does not want and will not break the trust, the oath given to his boss, perhaps to his office and to the land. And third, lastly, Joseph makes clear as an exclamation mark, this: "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" It's in verse 9b. You see, in the end, to break the oath to Potiphar was to harm and violate his agreement and his relationship, perhaps his friendship with Potiphar. But above this relationship with Potiphar was a sober understanding that above all things on heaven and earth, that to commit adultery is to break his oath, and to break that oath was, in the words of the Bible, great wickedness and sin against God. Joseph's strength in refusing these advances were fueled by his loyalty to his master, to Potiphar, and even more significantly to his commitment and recognition of the Lord who was indeed with him. The Lord was with him, raised him up. Joseph made clear that to break this oath through adultery is a sin against God. Here Joseph not only stood up for his ethical belief, but he also told a woman who probably believed in many gods. In those days, she probably was a polytheist, about the righteousness of the only true God. We have a choice to make quite often. If you made a mistake and you have committed adultery, or if you divorced unrightfully, never too late for a U-turn. In closing, the biblical view of divorce is not one to be taken lightly. And the only thing that allows for divorce, in the case of the Bible here, of God, is infidelity. Why? Because the marriage covenant or oath taken and given before God, before the church, family and friends, and the public has been broken. If it has, once broken, the covenant cannot be fixed. My mom used to say when I was younger, "Stephen, you can't fix a broken vase." It must be eliminated. Must be both parties, if they decide to remarry, they need to be remarried to start afresh with creating a brand new covenant. God does not play around with our taking an oath in the marriage covenant. And when broken, it's a major offense to the violation against God and those who entered into the oath covenant with him. All right. The good news is that God does allow for U-turns, but they must be authentic in heart and mind and action. And I trust you're going to take this subject seriously in our culture as it accepts divorce on the grounds of incompatibility or, listen, they don't have to get enough sex or whatever, any other reason other than breaking God's covenant oath. It's wrong. That's all I have to say about that for today. Listen, make sure you do a couple things. Go back, read those passages. Make sure we keep our fidelity to God and others, especially our husband or wife, our children, our friends, our workplace. Want to make sure you do a couple things. Boom. You want some real deep training? You want to go to our online training center, or at least our partnership with equippedacademy.com. You want to check out the online training there. Also, join my community, StevieGarofalo.com. It's free. You do not want to miss that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Stevie Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.